Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Lori, and today I'm really excited because I have my really good friend, Sky, and I'm doing like a first interview video for this channel. But I brought Sky on the channel because she is like a really inspirational person in kind of all walks of life. But specifically, I want to talk to her about something called ultrarunning, and I'll probably start off with that and see if Sky can explain first like what an ultrarunner is versus a regular runner.
Well, an ultrarunner is a regular runner, but just one who likes to run really long distances. Usually ultra running events go from 50 kilometers are common distance, as well as 50 miles, 100 kilometers, 100 miles.
Wow.
And those are the distance events. And then there are timed events where you might run for 6 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours or more.
Wow.
Try to rack up as many miles as you can in that period.
Okay, 24 hours. I mean, that is crazy. So basically, ultra running ranges from anything over 26 miles up to your 24-hour.
There are even longer ultra runs. There are 48-hour runs, 72 hours, 6-day races, 10-day races. And I think the biggest ultra that I know of is the 3,100-mile race that's held right here in Queens, in Flushing. It's called the Self-Transcendence 3,100-mile event. And I think runners have about 52 days to complete that distance, which is run around a block in Queens.
Wow.
That's the longest I've heard of. And then there are other events like running across the United States, which is also like 3,000 miles. Yeah. That's an ultra run.
So Sky is like so good at this that she was on the U.S. national women's team. She's like the real deal. But I want to hear like a little bit about how you first got started. Like when did you start running?
I started running really about 10 years ago when I moved to Hong Kong and started working at a law firm. And at the time, I'd always tried to run a little bit here and there, and I always wanted to be a runner. It's something I think I always wanted to do ever since I was like 14 or so, but it wasn't really part of like my school's curriculum. I didn't go to a school that had like track and field kind of teams, so I didn't do it growing up at all. But I remember trying to run when I was younger, like when I was in high school and college, and I always found it so difficult. Like my face would get red. I would just turn really...
This is like on a treadmill or outside?
On a treadmill or outside. I remember one of my first runs, I tried to run next to Central Park up Fifth Avenue. I was probably like 15 or 16. And I just remember feeling so hot and like my face was just burning up and I had to stop and I couldn't keep running. So I did some of that for a while. And then there were times when I ran a little here and there, like kind of casually on a treadmill, around a track, on the streets. But it didn't really start to stick until I moved to Hong Kong. And that was in 2004. And I signed up for my first race, which was the Hong Kong Half Marathon. And I actually started to prepare for it because I knew now there was something that I was running for, a goal. So I trained for it, I prepared for it, and then I ran it. And I guess I just wanted to finish because I'd never run that far before.
Yeah.
So I took it conservatively and finished comfortably.
Yeah. Well, how did you do that initial training, like having no experience at the time?
Running on the treadmill and running with someone who had a bit more experience running. So we would go out and do like the long runs, which at that time were like, start at 5 miles and build up to 8 miles. And then our longest long run was 10 miles.
So at what point in the training did you feel like you could do the race?
Oh, I never knew because I never run any race before.
Yeah.
So it was my first race period. And so I wasn't sure. I just felt like, okay, well, the basic training plan I had looked up online said, like, if I could run 10 miles, I could probably run 13 miles. So I ran 10 miles. And then I felt, okay, I can probably do this. But then I started out pretty slowly and nothing bothered me too much. And I took it pretty easy. So it was definitely... that approach that I think made it manageable. And
how did you push past that? Like you were saying that you got like really hot and like red in the face and everything. How did you push past that?
At some point, it stopped happening. Like maybe because I was young and I was running too hard and I didn't know what I was doing, so I would get hot immediately. I wasn't like warming up or doing anything. And I didn't, even for the half marathon, I didn't do any kind of fancy training plan. I just tried to run a few times a week and then run a bit more on the weekends.
Yeah.
So I didn't have like speed work or the kind of stuff that I think about now when I think about training for running.
So what was next after that first marathon?
So after the first half marathon that I did, I don't think I didn't do too much running for a little while. And then again, through my law firm, the next race I did was actually my first ultra marathon, even though I don't really think of it as running an ultra marathon because we mostly hiked. But in Hong Kong, there's an event called the Oxfam Trail Walker, which is a 100-kilometer event. It takes place over a weekend in November, and it's a team event, so it's 4 people, and you have to stay together throughout the event. So our goal was, of course, to finish all 4 of us together and to train on the course, which is a very hilly, mountainous type of course with a lot of ups and downs. That's why a lot of people end up hiking it. So we did that in November 2005. That was my second race.
Were you, I mean, at the point where you decided to sign up, I know you said it was interesting, but were you intimidated?
A little, but I also felt like it might be manageable. It just seemed like a fun event, something to do with 3 other people as a team, and getting to know the countryside of Hong Kong, which was something I didn't really know, and like getting out every weekend to do our long hikes as a team, where we would try to cover 20 or 30 or 40 kilometers on the course, was a really good experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like an adventure, I guess.
Yeah, it was really an adventure, and it really pushed me in some ways, like staying up all night. It took us a little under 30 hours.
Wow.
And somehow, after being out all night and covering 95 kilometers or so on foot, as we were getting to the end, we all decided to start running, that we had to start running. And that's something that always stuck with me later on in my training. It's like, I could run after being out for like 29 hours.
So this was
I could do that.
30 hours where you guys were awake the entire time?
Yeah, there were times when for me, there were times when I was walking and falling asleep at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
Where I would just close my eyes for like a few seconds while I took a few steps. This is when we were on the road, so it was easy to do. But I was so tired. This was probably after about 24 hours or so, or getting into like before the dawn during the night, when I was so tired that I could just close my eyes and take 3 steps and open them and then close. And that was my idea of sleep, but we didn't actually sleep.
And you had to carry all your food and water?
No, we didn't. There were checkpoints where we could always get water, and we had crew people, support, family, friends, and colleagues who came out to meet us along certain points in the course, and they brought us food. We actually sat down for full meals.
Oh, okay.
Like, after 30 kilometers, we sat down and ate pizza and pasta.
How did you feel at the end of the race?
Oh, I cried. I felt so overwhelmed with tears. I actually had a lot of pain in my knees in the last, I don't know, third or so of the race, at least the last 20 kilometers. I remember it was just incredible. My knees were hurting so much going on hills, especially the downhills. And I had remembered the last 20 kilometers as being pretty flat. No, it was on a paved road, but it was still hilly, and there were downhills. And there was one point where I was like almost in tears because it was hurting so much. And then when I finished, there was such an overwhelming sense of relief and that we had accomplished it. So I welled up a bit.
See, I think people who don't want to run, who don't run, always want to know like how it feels. Like, what is it about the running that keeps you going back? Is it like that you actually enjoy the process during the running, or is it that you enjoy finishing the race? You know what I mean? What is it about it?
I think different people have different motivations and feelings that go around running. For me, I enjoy the act of running, like the physical part of it, and it feels good, and it feels good afterwards, but it feels good during mostly. I mean, I've heard of people who talk about running as a lot of suffering, but they still do a lot of it. And for me, if it was a lot of suffering, I probably wouldn't do as much of it, because it's still very much something I do for fun and for enjoyment and pleasure.
And now that you are kind of such an experienced runner, like, what does it feel like, I guess, you know, once you're getting into the part where most people would find uncomfortable, like after 10 miles or after 20 miles? Like, what does that physically feel like to you?
Oh, I still get uncomfortable feelings, and I can still feel bad. And that's where a lot of it becomes a mental game, and experience especially comes into play. So anytime I'm feeling bad in a run, I know that lows are coming. So if I'm going into a race that's maybe 50 miles or marathon or any distance, I can know in advance that there are going to be times in the race when I'm going to feel shitty, or I'm going to hit a low point for some reason or another. And I know also that the low points pass. I don't think I've ever been stuck in a low point for like very much of a race. Part of it has to do with expectations as well. If you're stuck in a low point because you have a really high expectation and you know you're not going to meet that, then you might, decide, well, it's not going to work, but I might as well have fun.
So, like, how do you leap from, the marathons you were doing to a 24-hour run, like a 24-hour run?
Well, it really took a while. So with the marathons, for a long time, I was just running marathons and still considered myself a pretty casual runner, even though I enjoyed marathons and I kept signing up for marathons, but I didn't have very good experiences with marathons.
Why?
Because I still didn't know anything about training. Mm-hmm. I was just running for fun, and I would run, and then I didn't know anything about pacing or training or anything, so I was just doing my runs and then going to a marathon and probably starting too fast and then blowing up, or maybe I wasn't training enough, maybe I wasn't running enough miles to prepare for the marathon. So my very first marathon, which was in 2006, was a pretty good marathon. I mean, I didn't pace myself. I didn't have any expectations. I just wanted to run up 4 hours, which seems like a good standard for a marathon distance. And I ran 3:45, and that was running 3 or 4 times a week. Not a lot of running. And so people were like really impressed afterwards. Were like, oh, wow, you're like good at this. You're natural. I'm like, whatever. And then every marathon I ran for like years after that, I would blow up. And I had a little better luck with like half marathons and stuff. But I didn't really start thinking about running ultras again until after I had done the Oxfam Trail Walker 2 more times. So I did it again in 2010.
Same trail?
And 2011. Yeah, same trail. And then after doing that 3 times, I started to think that I could possibly do an ultra on my own.
Yeah. And did your other teammates also share in your like enthusiasm afterwards? I mean, have they continued with the...
Not particularly. No, I think I was the outlier. I think I was the only one who really got hit by the ultra bug.
Right.
So the next ultras I did one in 2012 by myself in California. It was a 50K. That was scary because it was the first time I was going to be out by myself, and it was in California near Lake Tahoe in the wilderness. So that was kind of interesting. And then I decided the following year in 2013 in January, so that's about 3 years ago. I guess that's when I really started thinking of myself as someone who was going to be an ultra runner or a regular ultra runner. I signed up for the solo version of the 100K race in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong 100. At the same time as I was running the Hong Kong 100K, I also had my first 100-mile race in the radar, which was actually a race here in New York City called the Great New York 100. And I was like, wow, I never really wanted to run 100 miles. But the idea of running 100 miles around New York City and all 5 boroughs just seemed really appealing and like a really cool thing to do. Plus, I also felt it was kind of a safe 100-mile option because I always thought of 100-mile races as being like trail races, like the one I had run in Tahoe.
Like where bears can attack you.
And where you're out in the wilderness, and if you get lost or injured or something goes wrong, you're going to be out for a while looking to find your way back.
I think that's how like all New Yorkers think about the wilderness. And then people who are like from less urban places are probably thinking like New York is crazy because there's cabs and like people
and crazy people and all sorts of stuff going on. But as far as running 100 miles, I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do it, like New York would be a good place. Also, I was planning to move back, so it would I thought would be a cool homecoming. And I thought, well, if anything goes wrong, I can just get on the subway or bus or call a taxi. I'll have some money in my pocket. I'll be home in an hour. Like no matter what. I won't be stuck in the woods for like 6 hours or overnight waiting for some help to come.
Very true.
So I felt it was like pretty safe, or at least it seemed like a good idea. So I'd signed up for that, and then I started thinking about how to train for it and prepare for it. So I did a few other ultra distances to prepare for it. Nothing major. I think I ran a 50K, and I probably did some long runs around the city that were like 35 miles.
It's so crazy because you're talking very nonchalantly about running distances that I don't even drive. I'm like, oh, this is 35 miles away, too far. I'm not even going to like go there for the weekend. And you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Well, I guess I enjoy running like that kind of distance. Like to me, that's my idea of like a fun day. If the weather's nice, it's not so much fun if it's like the middle of winter. But if the weather's nice and I can run outside for like 6 hours and maybe run with people as well and have it be like a social event and, you know, enjoy some scenery and maybe stop along the way, as long as I have food and water.
Right.
To me, it's fun. To me, like, it's an ideal kind of day to spend out running. And I feel like I'm also, you know, at this stage in my life, lucky that I get to do that. Like, that's always something I think about if I'm running a race and I'm not having a good time. It's like, wait a minute, I get to do this. I get to do this. This is fun. This is like not only fun, it's also, you know, a privilege of having the time, the leisure, the good health, to be able to be in that position to spend time running.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to put it. Do you feel that, like, I mean, to run at the level you're running at, do you need to have that natural talent, or can someone just do it from pure discipline?
See, I don't know, because I don't know how much of my talent is, like, natural talent and how much is just, like, okay, I really enjoy it. I mean, I struggle with any time, like, training and fast running, and it's something I haven't been doing lately because coming back from injury, I'm still building up my mileage, and I want to feel comfortable running. I think there are a lot of talented people, and people have different talents, too. When it comes to running, like some people might be good at climbing mountains, some people are good at getting down from mountains, some people are good at running fast from short distances, other people can run for a really long time and not be sore. So I might have like some specific things that I feel, I don't know if I'm really good at them or if it's just because I enjoy them, I'm more likely to do them. For me, I can run for a long time, like not very fast, and that's not painful. But like some people can run 50 miles day after day after day if they're running across the country, for example. For me, that just sounds like I would have no talent for that because I run 50 miles one day, I'm too sore the next day to do anything.
Do you think you could ever get to the point where you want to try something like that?
Maybe not. I mean, I have different goals that I might set for myself, but I don't think I want to run 50 miles every day for 2 months or 3 months or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's also hard to tell. I mean, people's goals change over time, and what appeals or what becomes easy or difficult can change as well. I didn't think I would be someone who would want to run 100 miles more than once in my life, or want to run 6 or 12 hours at a time. Many times a year. Yeah.
Okay, so the 24-hour, I don't think a lot of people can imagine what a 24-hour race is like. So is it over a trail, or is it around in a track, or how does that go?
Well, there are different kinds of 24-hour races. So I think when people want to set records, the fastest 24-hour race will be run on a track. I haven't yet run a 24-hour race on a track, or actually any race on a track ever. I've run parts of races on tracks, but not a race where I was on a track the whole time. So 24-hour format, it's usually designed to allow the runners to run as many miles as possible within the 24 hours. So usually the ideal is a pretty flat course and a short loop so that the runner can have access to their things fairly often. Now, there are 24-hour races that are run on trail loops and that are run on longer loops that could be 3 to 4 miles or so. And there are ones that aren't flat. But if you want to run as much as possible within 24 hours, the ideal is really a track. And then after a track, the ideal would be a 1 mile short loop.
And so how does the logistics work? You bring all the stuff you think you're going to need in a 24-hour period, and you put it in a designated spot or something?
That's usually how the races work. They'll have their own aid station, a place where food, water, and other supplies are provided for runners by the race organizers, and that can be used by any of the runners. But most runners are likely to bring their own stuff as well, and you might want to set up a small table and have your stuff so it's not on the ground. You might want to bring a chair in case you need to sit down, or if you have a crew person, they might want to sit down at some point. You would probably not bring your own water because that's readily available, but I would want to bring my own food and any special drinks or any special things that I feel that I need.
And what about like going to the bathroom?
Most will have some sort of facilities on the premises. They might be porta potties. The 24-hour race that I completed had a very nice kind of bathroom facility that was heated and had plentiful bathroom stalls and was very clean. So it was really nice in there, and it was right on the course. So you would just, if you need to go to the bathroom, you go and you leave and you keep running. In a 24-hour race, everyone's going to have to go to the bathroom at least a couple times and do other things and stop and take breaks, maybe change shoes, maybe stretch out, do other things. So you think of that in advance, and you know that's going to happen. You're not just trying, unless you're going for a record, I think you're not going to try to run straight the whole time.
So like when you're feeling low, is it, I mean, aside from just the physical like exhaustion, what do you feel like in your head? Like, do you want to quit, or is it, what are you thinking?
Well, I never want to quit unless I have to. That's one thing. The 24-hour race that I ran that I completed and had a good outcome in, well, it was my first 24-hour race, first of all. So my first goal was to run and keep moving for the whole 24 hours. My second goal would be like to hit 120 miles or so, which was the minimum standard at the time to qualify for Team USA for women. And then my third goal would have been like 130 to 135 miles. So when I started running, I was running at a pretty good pace, and it was fun and interesting, and I was racking up the miles and setting new PRs for different distances with the times that I was running during that race. But yeah, there were times when like everything hurt and like I just couldn't go any faster. Not everything hurt, but enough things hurt that I couldn't run faster than I was running. And it was a bit of a slog. And there were many hours where my stomach didn't feel good and everything tasted horrible. And that's when it's good to have people just telling you, eat this, take this, have this gel. You have to take calories. So you keep taking calories and you keep moving. And it was good to have, the support where people are like, where my crew was like, you're doing great, keep going.
Do people sleep or take
Some
naps?
people sleep. Some people set up tents or have their cars on the premises set up so that they can sleep and take naps. Some people do sleep, and they'll sleep for a while, and then they'll come out and run some more.
Did you?
No, wow. Because I couldn't afford. I knew, for me, it's really hard. It's easier sometimes to just keep running.
Yeah.
And I also, I knew that there was no way I could hit like 120 miles or 130 miles and sleep as well. And 24 hours, I think, it's not long time enough that you actually need to sleep. I think all of us have been awake for like 24 hours at some point in our lives or others. So mentally, it's pretty easy to wrap your mind around staying up for 24 hours.
Yeah. We didn't talk about your injury.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, what happened? This was the second time you've ever, you embarked on a 24-hour race.
Right. So after I ran the first 24-hour race in November 2014, and I ran 136 miles, which was enough to qualify for Team USA to be one of the top 6 women who had run 24 hours within the qualifying period. So I was selected to join Team USA and run at the 24-hour World Championship, which was held in Italy in April of last year. So I went to Italy. I really focused all my training on that race for the spring. I really didn't race much at all otherwise, and I really just focused on my training. I still don't know what happened, honestly. I was running, and at one point I started feeling some pain in the inside of my hip. It really felt like I was sore or tight. And it didn't feel
different than usual when you were.
No, I've had tightness in my hips before, so it was something I was feeling a little in both sides, but more on one side, and so I thought it's just a little tight and it'll pass eventually. So I kept running, and it got getting worse and worse, and so I started feeling this around 7 hours, and after about 11 hours, I couldn't run anymore, and it wound up being a stress fracture in the femoral neck, which is the top of the hip near where, right below the ball of the hip. So it was a pretty bad injury, and I was on crutches for 3.5 months, and then I couldn't run for about 5.5 months after this happened. And I still don't know how it happened, how it came about, because prior to running in the race, I hadn't had any issues in that area. And it just came up. And the doctor I saw thought, well, it's just overuse. It can happen. Sometimes people have got this injury while just running 10 miles, is what I found out later from researching online and stuff. Like, one day it can just kind of snap.
5 months is, I think, pretty fast recovery, right, for a hip fracture?
5.5 months for not running, and I still consider myself being in the recovery area, is not actually that short. I think my therapist, my physical therapist, was pretty conservative in getting me to start running. He kept me off running for a few weeks after my doctor said I could go back to activities with no restriction, and that was okay. And then coming back to running was a very gradual, slow build-up.
You're already back to winning races, though.
Well, small races, and I don't feel very competitive.
Do you have, and I know this is like an issue with a lot of different kinds of athletes, but do you have an issue where, like, now when you're competing, do you like trust your body less?
A little. It's scary coming back from a big injury, because I know that there could be some pain that I might think it's normal to push through that is really, like, not normal, and that could be a sign of an injury. So that is a part of the recovery as well. I think building up the confidence and the trust in your body again that you're going to be okay. And as far as any of the races I've run since starting to run again, I'm always very careful of thinking, is this pushing too hard? Is this the safe zone? And I try to stay in the safe zone as much as I can. And then maybe when I get towards the end of a race, I'm like, okay, now there's only 2 or 3 miles left, or 4 miles, and I can push a little harder now. I know I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of a shame that it's not like more, I guess because it's not easy to televise a 24-hour race or something, or like any sort of ultra race, because it's such an amazing thing, but if you can't televise it, then people like don't really know what goes into it.
Yeah,
know?
And I think it would be easy to televise, because especially in a short ultra, in a long ultra race that is on a short loop, like a track race, you just set up the camera at a point and people pass through.
Right.
And there is a group that does film and live stream ultra races.
Yeah.
The ones where it's a big course, where it's like a point to point, or a big loop course with like many miles between stops and people getting spread out, that's not as interesting to watch.
Do you think that there's like enough attention paid to the sport? Like, you know what I mean?
From people who are interested in it, I think they pay attention to it. In terms of it becoming like a mainstream thing, I think it's definitely growing, but I don't know how big it will become, because even marathon running, if you look percentage-wise at how many people complete a marathon in a given year, it's still pretty tiny. And then of that percentage, how many of those are doing ultra marathons as well? It's an even smaller percentage.
Yeah.
Some people like that it's a smaller community, that it's not overly commercialized.
Right.
Or that it's not too busy. And already some of the more popular ultras are really hard to get into, and run lotteries where you basically have almost no chance of getting in.
Well, I guess the question always is when something like this, when it comes to money, is like, is there enough interest in it and sponsorship in it where anyone who is really good and like wants to get into it can, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or is it like, are you able to do what you do if you don't have like another job or whatever, you know?
Yeah, well, there are some professional ultra runners who have sponsorships and are parts of teams that can make enough of a living off of it. I don't think anyone's getting really rich off of ultra running. It's still not even close to the level where like track and field in the U.S. are, and even that is not something where many people are making a lot of money from it. So it's still pretty small and pretty tough.
Do you take what do you take? I'm sure you do take something, but from your overall running experience, like in terms of like how did you learn anything from it that you apply to the rest of your life?
Well, I think a lot of life is like an ultra marathon, and there are always low points, and they pass. So just like anything, I think that's a key lesson. Another is just like what you can, like, the consistency, training consistently is something that is applicable to the rest of life. If you do something consistently, you get better at it.
Very cool. So, maybe do you want to tell people how to find you if they want to find you like on social media and everything?
Oh, sure. I'm Skycita, Skycita, on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm on Facebook under my name, Sky Canaves.
And do you like tweet and stuff about your running or?
Not that much, but sometimes, occasionally.
Okay. Yeah. Well, do you have a Facebook page? Like a fan page?
No, not yet.
Okay, we should start a fan page here. I'm going to start a fan page and I'm going to link it for and you have many talents obviously, but for your running so that we can let people find you somewhere. Okay. Thank you for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.